Acclaimed director Paul Verhoeven has been hailed for his dazzling command of style. His unblinking eye for brutal realism and explicit sexuality always provoke controversy.
And that doing this part would lead to a lot of what you would call real straight suffering, because he had to go to a lot of very unpleasant things as an actor. Part of the movie he's completely painted blue. Sometimes he's completely painted black or green.
With green contact lenses, green teeth, a green suit, a green hood that kind of feels like your head is in a vice.
All right, this is rehearsal. Quiet, please.
He has to climb and he has to run and he has to fall.
Rain on.
He's immersed in water and he's in rain, he's in puddles. It is a very, very demanding role.
And cut it. Cut.
So you want to be an actor?
The job of the special effects people is to drive me insane. Every day they come up with some new technique to make me go insane. They haven't broken me yet.
Mommy.
In all honesty, I read the script and I thought, oh, this is easy. This is all digital. And then when we started to discuss it with the special effects supervisor, Scott Anderson, I started to realize that it had to be done in a really different way. When we studied that 2 years ago, how Sebastian Kane is going to look in the transformations when he becomes invisible, because then the layers peel away. The skin goes first, and then you see the muscles, and then the fat goes off the muscles, and then the muscles start to disappear, and ultimately the skeleton disappears too. And studying these things gave us, from the very beginning, a perfect idea what we wanted to see later in the movie.
Sebastian, can you hear me?
Ah! Christ! The lights! Turn off the goddamn lights!
As we analyzed all the problems and really started designing the effects, it just became absolute that Kevin had to be there to do it.
You know, you read a script and you're invisible through 75% of the script and think, well, that's a great gig, I don't have to show up. I think I've been less doubled on this movie than I have on anything else.
Even if he's invisible, when we work, he's there. And we get to act with him, and then later they'll actually take him out. A lot of special effects movies, you're working with something that's invisible, and maybe they're holding up a broomstick, but we're always working with a real sense of reality here.
The difference with this particular movie is that the main character, Kevin, is a visual effect. So it was important to maintain his body language throughout the movie.
We started out by literally scanning his whole body into the computer. We literally painted grids on him and made him run, made him jump, made him push people, made him lift things.
Man, we had to concern ourselves with all of the internal musculature and internal organs and various parts of the anatomy. We build a digital likeness, and then we'll put those through various animations and try to best replicate exactly what Kevin's doing in real life.
We built a human being from the inside out. I mean, it's kind of godlike in some ways.
Go!
Good.
Well, I think that there are a lot of scenes that I think are very interesting. There's the three transformations. The transformation of the gorilla, Sebastian become invisible, and Sebastian trying to come back to visibility with Phil. These three scenes are absolutely marvelous, I think.
When I read it, I said, I know this can be done. I know we can do it. I have no idea how we're going to do it.
I actually thought it couldn't be done.
You don't make history by following the rules. You make it by seizing the moment.
I've seen individual layers be worked on, but I've never actually seen a whole human.
I don't think anybody has done this. They built the body like a really mechanical thing. All the tendons and all the muscles are really perfectly attached here and there. So when you move your arms like this, you would see all this swelling, and you would see everything inside rotating, not only the outside, but even if you would look inside, you would see the bones rotating. And if you move the fingers, that's all completely, looks completely real.
I'm starting to feel something.
The live-action character that's in the shot will be used for different purposes depending on the different type of shot. In a case where part of him is transforming away, we'll use a lot of the original Kevin in the plate. And what we'll do is add in patches of areas onto that character. In the cases where he's gone beyond the point where we see skin, we'll do away with him completely and put in a fully synthetic model in there.
So one of the many challenges on the Hollow Man were the challenge of getting a computer puppet to look like an anatomically correct human being.
The first thing we had to do in creating our digital version of Kevin Bacon was to do a cyber scan. Basically, this is a laser scan set of data to get his exterior skin.
Literally scanning his whole body into the computer, toenail to top of his head. But then it became the whole study of his physiology.
Normally in most computer graphics films, you just look at the exterior skin. But for this particular film, we had to create all of the internal organs as well. Creating that internal musculature set, that internal anatomy, is something that really hasn't been done before, and especially to this degree. First thing we wound up doing was taking a lot of video and photo references. Basically, we wound up gridding him into putting markers all over his body that told us exactly how his various joints and body anatomy changed as he moved.
We made him do calisthenics, made him stand on his toes, lift his arms, so that we could begin to study where his muscles attached in what area on his body. We measured each joint.
If we take any shortcuts, if we are not correct in our measurements, we're not going to get a proper lineup. We have to have the capability of making our Kevin move exactly like the real Kevin. So what I'm doing here is what we call a process of retrofit. We've done a cyber scan, then taken our generic human skeleton, and I'm trying to place the bones within his body where they really would be.
They went to a full anatomical course, so they know exactly what happens when you take the real skin and pull the skin backwards, and how liquid this is, and how wet it is, and how much fat there is. That you can, of course, study better with a real dead body.
It reminds you of a piece of meat you've seen or eaten. To get our meaty look of the muscles, we needed to have the right speck hits and the right glints on the muscles in the right place to really sell it as wet and having many, many different layers. Then after we did that and sort of made it as anatomically correct as possible, then our modelers went in and actually cheated it a little bit more, because we looked at the muscles with the skin off. We don't have a lot of the fat represented here, and that actually fills out a lot of the face. And so the modelers actually expanded out the muscles in that area to fill in and make it look more like the outer surface of the skin.
And we had another team that went along and did the animator controls and figured out exactly how to get animator to move the basic skeletal portion.
The human anatomy has very defined limitations to it. As an animator, you find it very frustrating. You just want to push an action a little more, and you can't do it.
You have to be so precise and with all these little details, because it's all mathematical formulas. And if you make a mistake, then the nose is suddenly here, or the nose is upside down, or whatever.
Another thing that really just made it so difficult for us is the actual amount of data and amount of geometry that we had to push through our system. We had to buy better and faster computers to be able to handle it, and even then, we actually couldn't load our whole model in at once.
We pushed it to the limit. Wherever we could do something, if it was the right thing for the story, we did it.
I have never seen anything so beautifully digitalized. It's really, it goes beyond what anybody has done. It's probably 100 times more complex than a dinosaur. Nearly beyond what could be done. But I think we do it.
enormity of the task, I think, is mind-boggling. I think the final Sebastian character has over 5,000 texture maps. And what those are little painted pieces of information that would go into each and every muscle, every bone, every tooth. Every one of those things has little individual paintings that somebody had to do by hand that give the life and detail to each and every single pieces of the body. And whether or not it's a tiny little bone in your foot to the skull or the face, each one of those pieces was hand detailed and made to match, made to specification. And every object has multiple ones of those. So if you think of the number of moving parts in the body, plus the number of bone, muscles, it's a phenomenal undertaking. And I think until the dust settles and we won't really know exactly how much we created. Having worked with Paul on Troopers, I draw an analogy is that Troopers, we had thousands and thousands of pieces out there in space. This is like a Swiss watch. It's just as many moving parts, but in a tiny little piece.
We used the original Kevin Bacon for a lighting reference of where the lights are in the scene, and also a performance reference that our character animators will mimic his subtle motions. The other things we'll have to do would be his interactions with the bed, so we have to kind of see how his elbow, when it hits against the bed, what the wrinkles look like, and we have to generate our own wrinkles based on his movement. In our environment that he's transforming, it's very well lit, and actually in CG, it's a lot harder, and it's much easier when there's a dark, moody kind of look. In a brightly lit environment, colors will bleed off of the bed onto our character, and the red muscles will also affect the characters and the plate around them.